let me take you back to the moment when I actually told someone for the first time.
Okay.
It was terrifying to realize
to
that
say the words out loud.
It was terrifying.
Yes.
I thought I was going to die.
Okay.
Emotionally.
Yeah.
Obviously, physically, it feels like you're physically like, because you think, or let me speak for myself, I thought if anyone knows this about me, they will never accept me and love me again, and I'll be alone forever and die alone. That's kind of like how far it goes. And so after this fight happened, I was like, okay, let me take a look in the mirror and see what can I learn. Now, as a cocky 30-year-old who thought he knew everything already in life, because I was successful in sports, because I got results in business, I was like, what can you guys teach me? You know, like, I've gotten results. You haven't got results. Don't tell me what I need to change. It was this very defensive,
look at the scoreboard,
ego attitude that doesn't serve me, right? I started to say, okay, I'm going to start asking questions to people. I'm going to start looking for a coach, therapist. I'm going to start finding spiritual leaders. I'm going to go workshops, whatever people recommend me. Like, I'm going to ask for feedback and I'm going to go do it. Okay. And I went to this one emotional intelligence leadership workshop, and it was like 2 weekends back to back, like 4 days each weekend. And in the second week I did it, it got pretty intense. It was pretty intense of like going into your past, doing exercises with like individuals, small groups, like playing games, exercises to reenact situations in life, and then reflect and journal on what these things taught you and how you reacted in the kind of the workshop.
That's a hot room, dude.
Hot room, right?
That's a hot room, man.
So after like the halfway mark of this second weekend, we had did a lot of intense stuff, like talk about mom and dad and past pains and wounds and all these different things, like just going there, screaming, catharsis, all this stuff, journaling, reflecting, people are crying, sharing. And the trainer says, okay, we have addressed the past and we are creating a vision of the future that we want to create. And so we're going to start working towards our future. And we're not going to think about the past. We're going to focus on a vision and a mission and how you want to show up in the world as your authentic self. Okay. And creating an identity that is healthy and all these things. But in order to do that, we must make sure we've gone through everything in the past. We must essentially own our past. So if anyone has anything left to say that you haven't said yet, it's kind of like now is your moment or forever hold your peace. And I'm going through my head. We're all sitting there in kind of like a half circle with like an open space at the front. And I'm sitting there, I'm kind of like, it's silent for like a minute. I'm like, okay, I talked about, my parents getting divorced and struggling there. I talked about being picked on and being bullied and, being picked last in sports teams in elementary school, which drove me. I talked about like breakups from girlfriends that hurt me and like the sadness I felt, all that stuff. And I was like, why have I never told anyone this one thing that comes up in my mind almost every day? And I just thought to myself, I was in a state of like vulnerability. People were opening. I was in a safe environment after a couple weekends where I was like, okay. It just came to me. I was like, if I don't share this now, I may keep this to my grave. Yeah. I may never say this. Like it's either now or never. And whatever reason, I just like got up out of my chair. I walked to the front of the room and I remember I put my face down. It was like a carpet and everyone was in like a half semicircle around sitting. And I remember I couldn't look up in anyone's eyes. I had so much shame, so much shame. So I looked down the whole time and I just took a deep breath and I walked through the entire story of being 5 and being sexually abused by the babysitter's son for the first time, this like adult son. And I told the whole story and I was able to get through it like pretty calm, I think because I didn't look up at anyone. And then I like walk back to my seat. I sit down. I like sit up and look up. There's a woman, 2 women sitting on either side of me in the chairs. They're weeping. They both clinch me and hug me. And for whatever reason, I was one of those guys that just started like releasing 25 years of pain, sadness, anger, resentment, and just started bawling. Bawling, weeping. And the weeping and the crying made me feel shameful. And I felt shameful thinking like, oh my gosh, my life is over. I literally, after a few moments, run out of the room. We're in the middle of a workshop. I run out of the room. It's in like a conference ballroom in a hotel. I run outside of the hotel into like the back alley. There's a wall. I put my head on my hand and just kind of lean against the wall. And I'm just weeping, crying. I'm just like, I can't breathe. A few minutes go by, and I'm just thinking, I'm not going back in there. I'm done. This is like, my life's over. It feels like you're dying. Yep. This grieving process. I feel a tap on my shoulder a few minutes later. This guy turns me around. He looks me dead in my eyes. He's probably like 55, 60 years old. He looks at me. He goes, "You're my hero. You're my hero. I was 11 when this happened to me. I've got a wife and 3 kids. They don't know. I've been suffering for however many years, married with this. I didn't think I'd ever tell anyone. You gave me permission to tell I get chills thinking about this because, and then a bunch of other men came out, and it was only a couple of the guys that experienced some type of sexual abuse, but it was like so many men had something else that they were holding on to. They weren't sexually abused, but it's like, I feel shame around this. I feel shame around this, and I've never told anyone. And I was just like, what? I thought, first off, I was the only one in the world who had been sexually abused. And so I thought something was wrong with me. And the more I started to study and research it, 1 in 6 men have been sexually abused, right? It's 1 in 4 with women.
And I still don't believe that 1 in 6 number. I think it's more.
It might be.
That's me.
Yeah. That's like men that are willing to talk about it, right? And but this was 10 years ago when I opened up about it. I had never seen, whether I wasn't willing to acknowledge it when I saw it, I don't remember seeing anyone talk about it on TV, like men. I don't remember athletes opening up, or singers, or role models being like, "Oh, this is what happened to me." Business leaders. No one talked about these things back then. And we're starting to see men now open up more. Athletes are starting to open up. People are talking about these things. But I just thought my life was over. But that was the moment my life began.
That's right.
That was the moment where it unlocked the ability to start feeling freedom. I didn't feel free yet, but it opened the door for peace to come in. And that was the start of what has been now a 10-year learning, trying, mistakes, growing, falling back 2 steps, moving forward, getting in alignment, healing, trying lots of different modalities, from, again, workshops to, I'm talking deep meditation retreats in India, to neuroscience meditation retreats with Dr. Joe Dispenza, to extreme breathing and cold therapy with Wim Hof in Iceland, climbing mountains half naked in the snow, being pelted by snow, and doing breath work and meditation and mindfulness and cold therapy, like from emotional coaches to spiritual coaches, and trying everything. Yeah. And I don't think there's one thing that is the end all be all. I think it's like, do whatever you can do to create and be peace and free inside of you. So it's been a journey, man. But that was kind of when it started to open up.
That's awesome. Thanks for your bravery on sharing that.
Of course.
As you mentioned, the number of people who are listening to this, the men who will hear it and say, maybe I can say it out loud. And maybe the women listening to this can say it out loud, or they can turn and look to the person they're dating or married to and say, is there any stories you've, it just needs somebody to go first.
And
right?
I'm not saying you need to say it publicly, and I'm not saying you need to say it to your partner right away.
Right.
I think create an environment where you can say it to a trusted advisor,
that's right,
a counselor, a therapist, a priest, a spiritual leader, someone you truly trust first, to allow you to start processing it. Do not process it alone. Right. I just think that's the hardest thing to do, and near impossible.
It's impossible. The great David Kessler says, grief demands a witness. And I love that line. Just like it only works if I'm with. That's why every great religion over time has confession built into it. You got to sit with somebody else and say, this happened. I know, right? Man. And we've kind of taken that out, right?
And I just think when we conceal past shame and pains, it makes us more powerless.
Right.
As opposed to stepping into a greatness mindset. And that's just one of the elements. So it's first like recognizing where are the areas of my life that I am allowing powerlessness to rule me, as opposed to peace and greatness to inspire me.
So how do you do that when the cultural winds are so opposite that?
Man, they're
blowing the wrong way there.
Yeah, man. I mean, I don't know about you, but I grew up in the 80s in Ohio, and playing sports, you couldn't show any emotion.
No.
On the field, off the field, there was no room. An ounce of emotion was like, okay, we're going to name call you, we're going to pick on you, we're going to like call you a little wussy or whatever. We're going to like, haze you for months. And so it was always a mask. It was always rub the dirt on it. Like, don't show you're emotional. Don't show you cried. Don't show anything. So it was an unlearning of a model that I experienced that served me to get certain results, but didn't create freedom inside of me. Yeah. And so it was.
But it's both and, right? Like you got to feel it
and experience
and
it.
then go do it. Go do the next right thing.
You got to do the next right. That's the integration.
Right. That's hard.
You know,
that's asking someone to live the paradox, right?
As a doctor and a mental health coach, you know that integration is how you really heal. It's the awareness of, okay, I'm awakening to this idea that, wow, I've struggled this whole time in this, or I've been afraid to do this thing. A lot of times we're unconscious of it. It's just happening. But okay, now I'm conscious of this. I'm aware. Now I've got to process this thing. I've got to allow myself to release it in some way. You know, that can be physical, emotional, spiritually, like connecting with someone, however you want to release it. And then allowing yourself to integrate the nervous system healing when the response happens again. I don't know if you've ever been triggered in life where someone like poked something in you and you're like, you're reactive, right? Where you felt like, oh, that didn't feel good. I don't think the goal is to never like not feel a range of emotions, but when our emotions are running our decisions and we're reactive based on a wound, it just means it's pulling our energy away from service. It's pulling our energy away from love and connection and generosity.
That's right. I call it the gap. If I can just lengthen that gap between, I just felt this and whatever I'm about to do next.
It's between
I'm about to say it, feel it, whatever.
Yeah.
If I can just stretch that gap a little bit.
That's it, man. Yeah. So it's my intention is, how do I keep learning and integrating how to make sure my nervous system is safe with me, no matter what happens around me.